Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu, and I'm back with another episode of Road to Revival. So, we definitely got a lot of new cards to talk about, and yeah, let's just jump right into it. So, the first one is going to be Armorknight Cerberus Rebuddy. So, it is the Armorknight version of Cerberus instead of the Tyrant version of Cerberus, but the Tyrant version of Cerberus might get like a promo down the line because they've been doing some really weird and interesting things with the last set of promos. But what he does is if you have a weapon equipped, this card size is reduced by 2, so essentially a size 0. He has an act ability where you could put a monster from your field into the soul of your weapon, and then he's got a counteract ability, Full Fire. During each player's attack phase, choose a card on your opponent's field, and you may drop a soul from this card, destroy it, and you gain 3 life. So essentially, he just has a little bit of removal, and he is a size 0 for Armor Knights. He's just a fairly okay card. He's not too exciting, and he's definitely on the weaker side, but yeah, he's just not really doing a whole lot. Next up, we got another Omni Lord, and it is the third Water Omni Lord, Masseria Rebuddy. So obviously he's an Omni Lord, and then he has a really interesting ability that actually is supporting Omni Lords, where if 2 or more Omni Lords are on your field, all Omni Lords can't be destroyed and their abilities can't be nullified by your opponent's card effects. Then if there are 3 or more, all Omni Lords on your field get a plus 5,000 power boost, plus 5,000 defense boost, and a plus 1 crit boost. And then when this card is destroyed, draw a card. He's got Penetrate, Triple Attack, Soul Guard, and a lifelink of 2. So this kind of really reinforces the fact that Masseria just wants to be in an Omni Lord deck, and the fact that we've been getting a lot more Omni Lords in this set, all of them as rebuddies, definitely heavily enforces that the new Omni Lord deck is going to be definitely something to play around with, because it really wasn't doing a whole lot before, but now with all of these new cards, it's definitely looking like it's going to be a lot more powerful. And this being the protection card of that deck is definitely a very good thing. Next up, we got Great Demonic End Dragon Dahaka Rebuddy. What its ability is when this card would leave the field, drop 2 cards from your hand. If you dropped this card, it remains on the field. So a little bit of self-protection from removal there. And then he's got a counteract where you could pay 2 life and stand this card. It's got Penetrate, Double Attack, and a lifelink of 3 with 3 crit and some really big stats. So he's just looking to be a fairly average card. The protection from removal is pretty good. The fact that Dragon Dry and Zwei have some really decent card draw is definitely something to where you want to run more copies of this so you could discard it so it could stay on the field. So it's just kind of interesting, but it's not exactly doing that much. Next we have Drago La Marie Buddy. If a card with a critical 4 or greater is on your field, the size of this card is reduced by 2, making him a size 0 for that little bit of added aggression. And then on top of that, all dual golems on your field can't be rested and they can't be nullified by your opponent's card effects. So a little bit of additional protection there. And then he has a new Overkill ability where you could pay 1, and for this turn, all monsters on your field get plus 20,000 power and plus 2 crit. So it easily puts it over the threshold of that 4 crit to get his size reduced by 2. And then he's got Move, Double Attack, Penetrate, and Soul Guard. So he's just looking to be a good inclusion. The protection part's pretty nice. Next we have Yersinieas Rebuddy. So what he does is if an item on your field has a plague spell in its soul, this card's size is reduced by 3. So again, he's basically a size 0. And then on top of that, you may cast a plague spell from this card's soul by paying its cast cost. So he's basically just adding an extra spell into your hand without really adding it into your hand, which is a pretty solid effect. And then he's got an Overkill ability where you could pay 2 life and choose a plague on your field and put up to 3 spells from your deck into its soul and then shuffle. Then he's got triple attack and soul guard. So his overkill ability is really trying to set up either the item or him, so that way you could just cast more spells and have access to more spells. Next we have Oni Boss Ibuki Rebuddy. So when this card enters the field, destroy a monster or item on your opponent's field. Then if this card entered through ambush, deal damage to your opponent equal to the card's critical that was destroyed, and then this damage can't be reduced. So a little bit of removal, which is okay. It's not super great considering a lot of decks just have protection from removal. That's kind of just okay. And then he has an act ability where you could choose an Oni Assassin on your field. You may reveal this card from your hand. If it was revealed this way, put it into the chosen monster's soul face down, and you draw a card. And then he's got ambush, penetrate, and double attack. This just kind of feels really weak to me because the removal doesn't matter, and that's like the whole big thing. He does say draw a card, and the fact that you could just put this card into the soul of another Oni Assassin is like, okay. But if the whole idea is to use it for his ambush to remove something on the opponent's field, well, the chances are that ability isn't really going to be happening a whole lot, so it just kind of feels really, really weak. Oh boy. Next we have the Laevateinn Rebuddy we've all been waiting for. It's definitely a lot better than the old Laevateinn. So what it does is this card can be your buddy, and if this card is in your buddy zone, you cannot put monsters on your field, and you may equip any number of items. So immediately you just have his effect where you could mass equip. Like, you don't need to do anything. You just need to run him as the buddy, which is pretty interesting. The only synergy that his new, let's just say buddy skill offers is it doesn't allow you to splash in the Omni Lord anymore, because with the old Laevateinn, what some people like to do is they like to try to play the 9th Omni Lord in any of his forms first, so that way you could play Laevateinn, and Laevateinn doesn't get rid of the 9th Omni Lord because he's considered an item at that point. That's just what a lot of people like to do, and now you just straight up can't do it in the new Laevateinn, but it doesn't matter because what the rest of the card is doing is pretty good. So its equip cost is if you have no monsters on your field and you just discard a card, so borderline free equip cost is really solid. And then he has an overkill ability where during your turn, you pay 1 gauge, drop a hand card, and then drop the top 7 cards of your deck. And then you could equip any number of hero items dropped through this effect without paying their call cost. And then it's got penetrate and double attack and a really large stat line. It's definitely looking to be a very scary card, and it's definitely looking to be a very powerful deck. Next we got some spells. So, Buddy the Party, this is probably going to be a different name in English. I hope it is. But it's just a really insane card. So, its cast cost is just pay 2 life. And then counter, put the top 2 cards of your deck into your gauge. And then call from your drop zone up to 1 monster with Drum, up to 1 monster with Ball Dragon, and up to 1 monster with bots in their names into separate areas by paying their call cost. And then they become size 0s until they leave the field, and you can only cast this once per turn. Just the fact that it starts off by gaining you 2 gauge is already pretty solid for basically free. 2 life isn't that big of a cast cost, but the fact that it's able to make Drum, Ball, or Bots a size 0 and call them from the drop zone is really insane, because the fact that you could set up your drop zone is very, very easily. And even if you're not playing all 3 of them in a deck, the fact that if you're just playing Ball, Bots, or Drum in a deck and it's more centered around them, then this card is just a fantastic auto-include into any Ball, Bots, or Drum deck, or all 3. So it's definitely a really interesting and powerful card to play with. Next we have another spell, Son of Happiness. This is another Thunder Empire spell, and it's basically a Dragonic exchange for Thunder Empire and Hero World, which Thunder Empire really didn't need it. And by need it, I mean, like, they already have so many good cards that, like, this is just an easy include into the deck, especially if you're playing Lost Turbo or some other strat. Like, this is just a really powerful card. So what it does more specifically is you can only cast this card during your turn if a Thunder Empire or Superhero card is on your field. Not very hard at all. And then counter, you put the top 2 cards of your deck into your gauge, then look at all of your gauge and choose up to 1 card among them and add it to your hand. It's a little bit different than Dragonic Exchange, where Dragonic Exchange swaps a card. This just straight up adds you a gauge and then any card from your gauge into your hand. So you don't even need to swap. So it's probably a little bit more powerful in that aspect. And it's just looking to be a very, very powerful card, and I definitely don't think Thunder Empire needed this level of consistency, considering the tools that they already have is already insane. Hero World it's pretty good in, because it definitely is another solid Hero World card that can go into all of the superhero decks. Next we have Ball Dragon Ball Burst Smasher Rebuddy. And when this card attacks alone, it attacks all monsters on your opponent's field instead, so that's pretty good. And then your opponent cannot counter during the battle that this card is attacking alone, and then he's got triple attack and Soul Guard. So he's actually looking to be pretty scary because his innate ability is your opponent can't counter, so they just won't be able to even do anything about his 3 attacks at 4 crit, and he swings at the entire board. So he's just looking to be very, very scary. Next, we have definitely a card I've been waiting for, Drumbunker Dragon Rebuddy. Drum finally gets his Rebuddy effect, and he's looking to be really, really good. When you take damage, if this card is in the soul of a monster with Drum in its name, choose up to 1 monster on your opponent's field, pay 1 gauge. If you do, drop the chosen card. So that's just really powerful, considering dropping isn't a highly used form of removal, and the fact that it basically wants to be paired with Mugen Drum means that you could destroy a card on the opponent's field and then drop a monster at the same time. So it just adds more removal to an already removal heavy deck, and just on that fact, it's really powerful alone, not to mention the synergies that he can have with other forms of drum. And then, on top of all of that, he has a counteract ability, Drill Drum Bunker of Bonds. So, during your turn, call up to 1 monster with Drum in its name from your deck on top of this card without paying its call cost, and then shuffle your deck. And then you take 1 damage, and you can only use this once per turn. Then he's got double attack and Soul Guard. That's already still kind of insane, because, again, it's playing a lot more with Mugen Drum than any of the other drums. But the fact that you could countercall a new drum and then take a damage, obviously the Mugen Drum's ability would trigger, and so would this card's effect would trigger. It's just looking to be very, very scary in 5th Omnis, but I'm pretty sure he has applications in other drum-based decks as well, considering you could just call your main drum from your deck whenever you want, as long as this card's on the field. Next, we have 7th Omni Lord, Count Dawn Rebuddy. So we're getting another Omni Lord, all in the name of the Omni Lord deck. Returner of Dawn is his primary ability, where at the beginning of each player's main phase, if this card's in your drop zone, you could pay 1 life, draw a card, and call this card from your drop zone. And then you can only use it once per turn. That's already pretty decent, considering it's really easy to get him into the drop zone. And then he has the added benefit of having what the other Count Dawn was doing, where he acts as protection for another card on your field. So if a monster item would leave the field by an opponent's card effect, you may put this card from the field into the drop zone instead, and then that card remains on the field. So just, again, very, very strong effect. Being able to protect yourself from removal is definitely very powerful, and the fact that he's an Omni Lord means any deck can run this. It's definitely a very powerful card that should be ran in quite a lot of decks that are needing the extra protection. Next, we have Deathgaze Dragon Rebuddy. He has a pretty interesting effect where during the attack phase, you can call up to 1 size 1 or less with both Black Dragon and Death other than this card from your drop zone by paying its call cost, and then you can only use this ability once per turn. So just being able to counter call in a Spectral Strike deck is kind of interesting, and the fact that there's so many Deathgazes that this ability can target, or cards with Spectral Strike that this can target, that it definitely seems like it's a really good ability to have. And then obviously he has Spectral Strike, where when this card attacks and destroys a monster on your opponent's field, drop up to 1 of your opponent's gauge and deal 1 damage to your opponent, and your opponent discards a card. It's just a pretty solid Spectral Strike, and then he's got double attack and Soul Guard. Overall, not a bad card. Definitely seems pretty good, and definitely worth running in the new Black Dragon Spectral Strike deck. Next we have the 9th Omni Lord, Mukuro Rebuddy. Obviously he's another Omni Lord, all in the name of the Omni Lord deck. And then he has some pretty good abilities, where if you're transformed into this card can attack through the center. It allows you to run a full board formation, and then if you have him equipped, you could still attack. And then he has a counteract ability, where if you're transformed into this card, you could pay 1 gauge, and then call an Omni Lord monster or Dark Hero for that little bit of Dark Hero synergy from your hand without paying its call cost, and then it's treated as a size 0 until it leaves the field, and you can only use this ability once per turn. And then he's got double attack, and his transform cost is just paying 1 gauge. So overall, he's definitely playing a lot into the Omni Lord deck. He also plays into Dark Heroes with that ability too, but the whole if you're transformed into this card in Dark Heroes doesn't really matter as much, because Dark Heroes just don't really like having a field anyway. It's definitely feeling like it's playing more into Omni Lords than Dark Heroes, but it still works in Dark Heroes. But the fact that it makes them a size 0 and you could do this at counter speed is just a very, very powerful effect, because it can both be an offensive and defensive tool. And depending on what other cards you're playing with in the deck means that it could just be a very good toolbox card. Unfortunately, he doesn't have any basic protections himself, but obviously that's why you'd probably want to run Miserea's Rebuddy to pair up with it, so that way it does have some of those protections. Just the Omni Lord deck is starting to come together, and this card is just really enforcing a new Omni Lord deck. And then the last card that was spoiled in the set this week is the 6th Omni Lord, Variable Chord Rebuddy. This is definitely an interesting card. He's got some really beefy stats, just as something to note for a size 2. But his call cost is pretty hard, actually. So you can put any number of cards from your hand and 3 monsters on your field into its soul and pay 2 gauge. So that's already kind of an interesting call cost. Obviously, the whole idea is he's going to be going into a Neo Dragon Dragon Arms deck, where he's just going to have a whole bunch of different Dragon Arms in his soul so he can get all of their abilities. But the fact that you have to have 3 monsters on your field can be a little bit difficult, considering if the opponent plays Loyalty, then you actually might not even be able to play this card, which is like a really big deal, considering that would be the whole point of the deck if it's not in an Omni Lord deck. But in an Omni Lord deck, that doesn't matter, because you're just going to cheat it into play anyway. But he has a really powerful base effect of, at the start of each player's attack phase, put up to 1 card from your deck into its soul and shuffle your deck. So basically, tutoring out whatever Dragon Arm you want is already a very powerful thing, because you could then build a really strong toolbox of Dragon Arm cards to accommodate basically any situation. And the fact that this effect happens during each player's attack phase is really, really good, because it just means you get to add all of your Dragon Arms that much faster. And then when this card attacks, if it has 3 or more cards in its soul, for this turn, all monsters on your field get +1 crit and triple attack. And then this ability can only be used once per turn. And then he's got Move, Penetrate, Soul Guard, Counterattack. So he's just going to be a really, really powerful card when he hits the field. And the fact that he can give everything +1 crit and triple attack, if you're playing him in the Neo Dragon deck, is already pretty strong. And in the Omni Lord deck, this could also be pretty strong too. but his beefy stats and the fact that he has counterattack is already something that kind of makes him pretty solid. But the cast cost is probably where I have the biggest issue with him as far as running him in a Neo Dragon deck. So he's definitely worth playing around with and seeing what results you could get. And then lastly, we got another promo from Japan. Again, I have no idea where these promos are going to get placed when they come in English, if they even come in English. But the promo we got this time is 5th Omni Cavalier Dragon, Aliat Rebuddy. On top of getting a drum that works with 5th Omnis, we also get another Aliat, which works with 5th Omnis. So 5th Omnis is definitely getting a lot of love, and he's definitely a pretty solid card. So first he has a counteract ability where you could call this card from your hand, and if you do, you take 1 damage. So it's just a free instance of taking a damage to trigger all of your 5th Omni stuff. And then when you take damage, if another card with 5th Omni in its name is on your field, this card gets +2 crit and double attack, and then it can only be used once per turn. So there's the incentive for counter-calling him during the combat phase, is so that he can get an extra +2 crit and double attack. And then when this card attacks, put the top card of your deck into your gauge, you gain a life, and then if a monster with drum is on your field, you draw a card. So he is also gaining you some life, some gauge, and some card draw, and that ability is not once per turn, so if he does get double attack, then that ability will happen twice, and healing in 5th Omnis is a pretty big deal. On top of which, he's just gaining you more resources when he attacks. So it's just a very, very solid card, and definitely a card to play around with in 5th Omnis. That's kind of all of the cards that we got this week. It was a pretty big dump of cards, and a lot of them are doing some pretty powerful things. So we only have one more Omni Lord left to get spoiled. We got a couple of other cards that we're waiting on. There's still a couple of cards left to get revealed. The set is definitely looking to be pretty interesting. The one big thing to note, this applies currently only to the US players, is that some distributors have started to drop Buddyfight already, and they will not be carrying it. So the supply in which you can even get this final set is definitely going to be a little on the harder to find side. So that is just one thing to note. Make sure to ask your LGS if their distributors carry it and if they can find a way to get it if they currently don't. But that's just one thing to note, is that the set is definitely going to be a little bit on the scarce side as a lot of distributors have started backing out of Buddyfight. So with all that being said, feel free to leave a comment down below if you want to start any kind of topic or discussion. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content, and I will see you in the next video.